Another Mindful Monday. You know, we're all on a journey, and sometimes those journeys have challenges. However, you do not have to face those challenges alone, because at Mindful Mondays, we believe that we can do more together, and we're here to support you holistically and without judgment. So thanks for joining us today. And I would like to start by thanking our sponsors, Julianne, Legal Shield, and the Ben Method Academy for making this mindful episode possible. Now, have you ever thought about writing a book? Most of us would instantly respond with, "What would I write about?" or "I don't have a book in me." Well, my guest today will tell you that she does not believe that that is true. Julianne is a TEDx speaker, best-selling author, and a transformational story mentor. And Julie believes that storytelling is not just an art, it is a powerful path to soul remembrance. And with her groundbreaking work at the House of Story Medicine, she has guided over 300 authors in embracing their unique narratives and reclaiming their voices. She has over 17 years of publishing wisdom and a gift for sacred listening. So please welcome Julianne.
Oh, thank you. What a lovely introduction. Thank you so much, Laura.
Thank you. That's actually, really impressive and really pretty incredible. It's something I've encountered in the last couple of years, because never would have I would have thought to write a book. And I was one of those ones where people are like, "Oh, you should have a book." Okay, what am I going to talk about? Because you don't necessarily look at your own life as extraordinary, or maybe that some of the challenges that you went through could help somebody else in your story. So, but tell us, what inspired you to embark on your journey as a storyteller and transformational mentor?
Well, it was, I guess my journey started when I left England like 25 years ago. And I went sailing around the world. So I actually was traveling continuously for 7 years. And when I ended up in Canada, I had so many people say to me, "How did you do that? How did you afford it? How did you sustain yourself? You should write a book." And, and that's what happens, right? People say to us, "You should write a book." And that's really what inspired me. And when I returned to England to visit my grandma, she gave me back all of the letters that I had sent to her over 4 years. So that was a lot of letters, and she gave them back to me and she said, "Now you've got to write a book." So I'm like, oh my goodness, everybody wants me to write a book. And now I guess I've got all the material because, of course, my letters were very detailed. And so I decided, well, I'm just going to dive into this. I have no idea how to write a book. I'm being asked by people to do it. So I'm just going to find out how to do it. So I did online classes. I did lots of research. I attended webinars. And I found a system that kind of worked for me to use my letters in the book. So I actually used the letters, and then I used the narrative of the letters to join the story together. And when I published the book, I then had lots of people, say to me, "Well, how do you publish a book?" And so I started doing community classes, actually, just helping people. These are some of the things I learned about writing a book that helped me. And here are some of the options for publishing. And so that's really how I got started. It was very organic. It was very much in the flow, people asking me for that information. And before I knew it, I created this whole curriculum about how to write a book. I started teaching it. And then the people that I had been teaching said to me, "Well, how do we get published? You should be a publisher." And so then that led me to become a publisher. So, that's really how it all happened, Laura.
They're basically telling you, "You're not done yet. You need to keep going."
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So
No, and that's incredible. And I could see that, because I mean, when people, said that to me, and I'm like, after I got over that, I was like, okay, then I felt this feeling of like overwhelm, and you start getting 10 million things running through your head besides, what am I going to write about? What am I going to do? How long? Or, how you structure. Because some people are really good writers and some people are not. I've never necessarily considered myself one. I know some of my teachers have told me that I am, a decent writer, but was that ever a block for you, or did it just kind of come together?
It's I think what I discovered along the way is that it's the story that's important, not so much the actual writing, because there are amazing editors, and that's their job, right? That's what they're good at. They're good at taking stories and then turning that into good writing. So I realized that it's the storytelling which is the most important, and people let the writing part get in the way of sharing their story. And, actually, it was only about 10 years ago, Laura, I was helping somebody from Dyslexia Canada. She was writing a book about dyslexia. And as I'm telling her, my way of organizing the book, she said to me, do you know, that's dyslexic thinking. I think you're dyslexic. And I said to her, Sue, I'm a book publisher. I don't think that's good for business to say I'm a dyslexic book publisher. But as it turned out, she was right. And so I found out a lot about dyslexic thinking, and I realized that the way I was approaching book writing was very, very unique, because as uh, a total picture thinker, that's what dyslexic thinking is. You go to the end goal first. So you have this problem solving mind where you go to the end goal and you say, okay, well, what is it that I'm trying to achieve? Who's going to read this book, and what is it that they want to know? Well, that was automatic for me, because people had said, how did you do it? How did you travel for 7 years continuous? How did you afford it? So I already knew what people wanted to know. So instead of just writing a book that was, I went to Africa and I saw some elephants, or I went to Paris and I saw the Eiffel Tower. I mean, that's pretty boring. So it was more, how did I travel, and what was the lifestyle that I had living on a sailboat, and it helped me to realize how I could help other people. By approaching book writing in that way. So don't think of it as writing, think of it as storytelling, and think of it as, how can I help somebody by telling my story? And then once we've got that structure of how we can help somebody by telling my story, we then just get that story down. And that's what I help do. So I help pull the story out of people. And then once we've got the sort of the raw writing, which honestly, it can be letters, it can be journal notes, it can be, even just, it can be a transcript, like you and I, what we're doing right now.
Right.
We could take all of the interviews that you've done with people. We could take the transcript and we could turn that into a book, right? Because once you give some raw writing like that to an editor, then it's their job to use amazing grammar and spelling and sentence structure to take that writing and turn it into great writing, which is what you need for a book. So that's kind of like, I made that distinction. And that's also why I was okay telling people that I'm a dyslexic book publisher, because I'm not the editor. I'm the one that gets the story out of you, but I don't do the editing, right? So yeah, I mean, I think that's a very, very important distinction, that now, over the 17 years that I've been doing this, and I've published over 300 authors, my most important message that I give to people is, your job is to tell the story. Your job is not to worry about the writing, or worry about the spelling, or worry about the grammar, or think that your writing's not good enough. No, just tell the story. That's all we want. And then I'll help you structure the story in a way that makes it interesting and makes it information that somebody wants to read. And then we give it to the editor. They make it all beautiful and sound wonderful. And that's the happy ending.
It's a process, and I'm glad that you made that distinction. I know you and I talked a little bit one time about that, because when I hear dyslexic, I instantly think that it's when like reverse letters and you put things backwards. But you're talking a whole different thing, because like when we used to write programs, you're supposed to do this flow chart first, but I wrote the program and then I'd go back and write the flow chart. But I've never considered myself dyslexic, only because for the most part, I mean, once in a while, if I'm really tired, my brain, might slip or look at something differently. But otherwise, for the most part, I guess there was that's an interesting distinction because I didn't realize that there was, I guess, different levels to what they call dyslexia.
Yeah, well, yes, and that is, that's part of it. Is that in fact, Richard Branson right now is starting a dyslexic university, because there are some companies that are actually seeking dyslexic people because of their problem solving skills. So it's a very different way of thinking, and the reason why sometimes letters are reversed or words are completely missed is because our brains process so fast that it's very difficult for our fingers to keep up. And so, our fingers are trying to process the words, and mistakes are made because our brain is thinking too fast, and we can't go fast enough. So therefore, we're visual learners. We're visual in the way that we communicate. And if we have tech or we have words to deal with, then they can't keep up with us, basically. So
Right.
that's what happens. That's what actually happens, and that's what my TED talk is about, actually, Laura. So my TED talk is the gift of dyslexia, and
I was going to say that is, yeah, it's definitely a gift, really, because we look at too many things as like there's something wrong with them, but they're really not. They have
Mhm.
gifts that other people do not have. It's kind of like the ADD and the ADHD. They have different gifts, but
Yes.
because we can't, it's like we like to throw this normal label on things, and it's like nobody's normal. It's just you're not used to that, and it's really a very unique gift.
Yes, yes, it is, and it is. I didn't realize, but it actually really helps people to relate to me, and it really answers that question straight away. I don't think I'm a good enough writer because I say to them, well, I'm a dyslexic book publisher, and I've helped over 300 people become best-selling authors, and so therefore that obviously shows that dyslexia is not going to get in the way of you having a successful book. So it's really helped people to relate to me and not to feel, I think some people sometimes think of publishers, they sit them up on a pedestal and it's like, oh, I don't think I'm good enough for this person, or I don't think I'm good enough to write my story. And so I think people find me more relatable when I tell them that I'm dyslexic, because, instead of them thinking, oh my God, I don't want to have a dyslexic book publisher, because they go to that way of thinking,
Hmm.
of what that means, they tend to do the opposite, which is, oh, that's really interesting. Oh, maybe I've got a little bit of dyslexia, and that's why I'm having problems with my writing. So maybe this person will understand me. And so I think it really helps. I've had over 100,000 views on my TEDx talk, and a lot of comments from people saying, thank you so much for explaining what this is, because now I feel like I can share my story. I feel like I can write a book because now I understand it's about the story. It's not about the writing. And so, yeah, so I love it that I can inspire people to do that. And in fact, my very first training company that I created like 15 years ago was called Inspire a Book, because that's what I wanted to do. Is I wanted to inspire people to write books. But what it really is about is inspiring people to tell their stories. That's what it's really all about, Laura.
Yeah, yeah, and that is incredible. And I would imagine, people that do know that they're dyslexic, then they at least know that they feel safe with you because you can relate to what their challenges or what they feel are challenges. Like I said, instead of looking at them as challenges, I would say look at them as gifts because truly that's what they are.
Yes, yeah, and it's very interesting that when you have that viewpoint about different ways of thinking, it allows you to be more open about the different ways that people come to story. And my youngest author is actually autistic. And it was her mother that came to me, and she said she wanted to write the story about her daughter and how she has overcome, a lot of the challenges being autistic. And one of her dreams was to write a book. And so she was coming on, the mother was coming on one of my retreats. I do writing retreats, and she was coming on the retreat, and she said, can I bring my daughter? She socially, she can have some challenges, but if she's with me, then she'll be fine. And I would love you to inspire her to write her book. And I said, yes, absolutely. So at the time, I think Jenny was only 18 years old, and mother and daughter came on my writing retreat, and it was so beautiful to see Jenny really opening up, because she felt like she was in this safe environment where she could tell her story without people thinking she was crazy, right? Because she was all about writing about fantasy, because she had so many amazing stories in her head. And she was telling me about this distant moon that was called dysnomia. And she's like, well, my story is about this moon, and it's called dysnomia, and there's people and characters, and there's, mystical creatures that live there. And her imagination was amazing. And I was like, wow, this is a fantastic book. Like, Jenny, you've got incredible imagination. And she's like, no, this is real, Julie. This is not imagination. This is a real moon with these animals, these mystical creatures live on this moon. Well, of course, you would think that most people would go, yeah, okay, Jennifer.
Right.
Okay, Jenny. Yeah, that's okay. Well, I was, because of my dyslexia thinking, I'm like, that's really interesting. Let's Google dysnomia and see if there is anything that it says about this name. And so in the class, I Googled dysnomia, and sure enough, it comes up and it says dysnomia is a distant moon named for etc., etc., and then where it was and the characteristics of it, which said that it was possible that there could be life on the planet, and all of these things. And I'm like, there you go, Jenny. It's like, it's not just your imagination, right? You've just tapped into something on a whole different level that nobody else can tap into, because you're autistic, so you have autistic thinking, right? So that gave her such confidence to then tell her story and to talk about the characters, and they were also real. And then she was able to illustrate them, and so the whole story came together in such an amazing way. She published her book. She became a best-selling author, and now this is, I think, 6 years later, and her mom and her are the most favorite authors that do book signings in Indigo at least once a month. They have a line of people waiting to see them, because they've become so famous in Vancouver. They've been interviewed multiple times on TV shows, on podcast shows, on radio shows. And that young lady is inspiring so many autistic people by sharing her story, right? And now she has just published her second book. So it's, it really is incredible to know that if you are okay with sharing your story, really incredible things can happen.
Yeah, and that is really incredible. So the youngest one I've ever had on this show, she wrote her first book when she was 8. Her second when she was 9. She's done 4. She did a book tour, and she did a little bit backwards. I want to say backwards. She did it the way that went for her, because you're talking about how we could turn this show into a book. Well, she did the books, and then she created What's Up Young Authors podcasting, so that other kids could feel safe to write their books and tell their stories. And she tells them through animals, and it blew me away. And it was just incredible to see someone that young. And I mean, and here we are as adults, right? When we get hung up,
Yes,
we get so hung
right?
up. I think we get rid of the child brain. We start getting overthinking. We start worrying about what people think, or what am I going to say?
Yes.
And so I guess that kind of goes to tap into your inner child, because the rest of that doesn't matter.
Oh, you have to connect me with that young lady, because I would love to interview her on my podcast show, because that's called Your Story is Your Portal, which is a very good example of, how her story has become her portal to inspire other people. That's a beautiful story.
Yeah, I will do that. And I know we got to go to a break to get a word from our sponsors, but I want to say most of us, when you think about writing a book, you're thinking, oh my God, you see people or you see a program on TV that it's going to take months or it's going to take years. But I've heard you talk about being able to write a book in a week. And
Mm-hmm.
I know you're going to share that with us. So
I am.
so hang with us. We're going to take a quick break from a word from our sponsors, and then Julie's going to tell you how you can actually write a book in a week. We'll be right back.
I used to say we need a lawyer in the family. Having Legal Shield is better.
For less than $1 a day, you get access to vetted lawyers.
Want to create your will? Call Legal Shield. Got personal contracts to review? Call Legal Shield.
Do you need a vetted law firm to write a letter? Call Legal Shield. Warranty questions? Call Legal Shield.
For less than $1 a day, it's a no-brainer. Shield yourself from costly legal expenses. Call Legal Shield today.
You feeling stressed, burnt out, disconnected, and just stuck, and you want your mojo back? Hi, I'm Linda Joy Ben. I'm an international speaker, best-selling author, and transformational catalyst, and founder of the Ben Method, which is a revolutionary approach to healing, self-care, and transformation. Using my Ben Method, I've also healed my own body of cancer and autoimmune medication-free. Now I work with others, empowering them to reclaim and come back into alignment with their soul's mission and to restore their balance and freedom in their life, and then jump out of bed and go, wow, I feel fantastic. I love my life. I have the best life. And then spread that happiness out to their loved ones and everyone that they come in contact with. If you would like to reclaim your mojo, let's connect, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
Hello, I'm Julie Ann, TEDx speaker, author, and founder of Influence Publishing. Writing a book is a journey of self-discovery that uncovers the deeper truth of your soul's calling. Books are not products, they are sacred contracts. Your book is a portal to your soul purpose. Are you ready to reclaim your voice and write the story only you can tell? Visit YourStoryIsYourPortal.com.
So Julie, you got to tell me then, how do you get a book written in a week? I mean, are we talking a tiny book? Is it a decent book?
See, that's very good, because that's one of the other misconceptions about books. Okay, this is a book, right? It's basically 200 pages long. It's about 50,000 words. Okay, so this is not a book. I have a lot of people tell me that they're published authors, but that's not a book. That's a pamphlet. Okay. This is a book. Okay. So this is one of the first things I tell people is, if you want to write a book, then first of all, you have to be prepared to write about 50,000 words. Okay. So let's divide that down. 50,000 words, on average, about 10 chapters. Okay, so a book is about 10 chapters. All right, so 10 chapters, that's 5,000 words a chapter. Okay, now let's break that down a little bit more. So if you write a journal in the morning and you write, let's say you write two pages, on this kind of size, right? Mm-hmm. That's about 1,000 words. Okay, so let's break it down. One chapter is 5,000 words, okay? If you can write 2 pages in your journal, that's 1,000 words. So if you can write 1,000 words per day, in 5 days, you've written your first chapter, okay?
Okay.
Right?
Right.
So what we do when we do a book in a week retreat is we create this whole structure so that then you know exactly what you are going to be writing every single day. Okay, so what we do in a book in a week retreat is we put the whole outline together so that you know that you're going to write 10 chapters, and in each chapter, this is the topic. And then we divide each chapter into 5 writing assignments. And then what you do is you just, every time you come to writing, every single morning, you have your little checklist, and then you tick off your writing assignments. And that way you can get your book written without worrying about, getting started and then getting stuck halfway through. So writing a book in a week is possible. We actually do a book in a week retreat in Mexico. And if you are absolutely committed and want to get the book written in a week, it's quite possible to write a chapter a day. When you think about just one assignment per day is only 2 pages. If you can write 10 pages a day, then you can write your book in a week.
So what would that's actually pretty incredible when you break it down. Doesn't sound exactly so overwhelming. What would that retreat, what does that experience look like, or what is that process?
Okay, so again, this is something to do with my dyslexia. So my dyslexic thinking means that we go to the end goal first. So before you start any writing at all, you plan the whole book, right? First of all, you say, why am I writing a book? If you don't know your why, then you're not going to be disciplined enough to write. You've got to really know your why. Why do you want to write a book? For most people, they want to write a book because they want to help somebody else. They've got information or life experiences that they want to pass on so that other people that have had similar experiences can get through it a whole lot faster, right? So if that's your why, then you've got a good chance of being disciplined enough to do the writing. The next thing is to say, who is it that you can help, right? And what is it that they need to know? Then when we say, what is it that we need to know, we do a mind map. So we have big pieces of paper, big colored pens. You can see I'm all about color.
It looks good on you. You're nice and bright all the time.
Thank you. But we do use the color deliberately because that's how you engage your creative mind. So I'm also an NLP certified trainer. That was from like 20 years ago, but I use the NLP techniques to help people do the mind mapping exercise. So we use these big colored pens and we basically do mind mapping where you start with kind of one circle in the middle and then you create these kind of spiders, and those spiders become the chapters. So we end up with like 10 little spiders on the big piece of paper. And each one of those spiders say, okay, so I'm going to talk about, let's say, I'm going to talk about Africa. The book that I wrote myself was Around the World in 7 Years. And so each chapter is different countries. So if I'm going to write about Africa, what am I going to write about Africa? So my little circle will say Africa, and then it'll have all of the subtopics to do with Africa. Okay. So then you end up with your checklist, and then you use that checklist to create the whole writing plan of your book. And the important thing about that, Laura, is that, what it means is that you don't waste all this time reading what you wrote yesterday before you start writing what you're writing today. I mean, that's like the biggest mistake that people make is they do their journal writing and then they read what they wrote yesterday before they write again. So having this discipline of having like a little checklist, you just come to your writing and you go, okay, so today I'm going to write about Africa, and today it's KwaZulu Natal and Zululand and my experience at the ceremony. So I'm just going to write about that. Nothing else. I'm not going to write about how it fits in with the rest of my book, or all I'm going to do is write that story. So that's it. It's actually very easy. The thing that makes it really joyful and easy is that I help people to write their stories as a way of having a portal to what their soul purpose is. So, your story has a meaning. Like our life events are not random. Everything that's happened in our life has a purpose. And so when I'm doing that mind map exercise with people, I'm kind of uncovering their hidden stories. I'm uncovering their life journey. And we get to really see, what is it that you've lived in your life and how has that truly helped you to understand how you can help other people. So it's kind of life-changing because people get very excited. They're like, oh my God, I forgot all about how I used to do art all the time, or I used to do music, and how it really helped me when I was having problems. And so people are like, they get excited because, I mean, when do we get a chance to actually think about our whole life and reflect on it?
Right.
And then start to put those pieces together and go, oh, that's why that happened. It's like, I think about my book, which is Around the World in 7 Years. That book was, yes, it was about my travel in 7 years, but the purpose of the book was to lead to what I'm ultimately doing now, which is helping other people to write books, right? So it's
Right.
not always obvious that, traveling around the world would lead to a life purpose of being a book publisher, but that's how I help you connect those dots.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you ever have people that have like those mental blocks? Or I'd imagine for some people that have had more maybe of a traumatic, happenings, that they're trying to share their stories so that other people feel supported and not alone, that it can sometimes trigger them. Does it
Yes.
block them? You able to help them get through that, or?
Well, that's why I have a co-facilitator on my retreats who's a therapist. So, it's a really good point that you're making, because when people do delve into their past, they could be triggered by the trauma that they're writing about. And so Jennifer Nagel, who co-facilitates with me, is a therapist. In fact, she's the trainer of therapists. And she is able to really help you look at your trauma in a different way. So she repurposes your trauma and, creates a safe container where people are okay with telling their stories. They're okay with being vulnerable. And I always say to people, this is a very healing journey, telling your story. If when you've told your story, you decide, I don't want the world to know this and I don't want to publish, that's fine. You don't have to publish. It's the fact that you've gone through that journey of reflecting on your story and writing your story. But, by the end of it, when other people are reflecting back on them and they can see how helpful they can be to other people, they want to go ahead and publish. So, it's about vulnerability, but it's also about creating an environment where the person feels safe being vulnerable and having the people within the circle that can support that person if that happens. So yeah, we have a therapist in all of our sessions.
Good to have around, and good to know. So when people are writing, they don't necessarily, if I'm understanding you right, you don't have to worry about it flowing together. Like you said, when you talk about Africa, you just are picking the different places in Africa that you were at and writing down kind of what you remember, but it's not necessarily in any kind of order.
You don't have to write in order at all. I mean, that's the whole idea of doing a plan beforehand, is that then you don't have to think about the order, right? Our goal is to create a structure so you know what you're writing. So for many people, it's just a chronological order. It's like, this happened, then this happened, then this happened, this happened. So we create that to make it easier to do the writing. Once you've got the first draft and we work with the editor, that's when we get to do the creative writing. That's when we get to, creatively look at how we structure the book. So, for me, I'm not just talking about Africa in terms of, I went here and I did that. What I'm actually talking about is the influence that Africa had on me, the influence that people had on me, the influence the culture had on me. I delve into the topic of apartheid and, how that influences people. And so, even though it looks like all I'm doing is writing about, I went to Africa and I went here and I saw some elephants and whatever, no, it's actually the structure of the story is way more advanced than that. Mm-hmm. But it's not your job. That's where a publisher and an editor comes in. So, from the perspective of a publisher, it's my job to look at, okay, now we've got the story. I've got the story out of you. Now, how do we put that in a format that makes it really interesting for the reader. And often that is not chronological, Laura. Like it's for most people, I recommend that you actually start like in the now, and then we reflect back. So, I'm working with a lady right now who's talking about her generational trauma from being Russian and being an immigrant in America, and how that really influenced everything that she did, because she's influenced by the trauma of her grandma and everything that happened, right? So
Right.
we're not, when she first had all the writing, it looked very heavy, because she's just talking about all this trauma. And I'm like, okay, but we're not going to do it from that perspective. We're going to start when you did your ayahuasca ceremony in Costa Rica, because when you did your ceremony, that's when you had all of these, you could actually feel your grandma and what she went through, and you were able to really relate to the trauma that she went through. And so she actually starts the book in a retreat center, and she's sharing with the group what she saw in her vision through her grandma's eyes. And then she then goes on to tell the story from that context of a retreat center, right? So it's like we tell the story, but instead of sort of like being, really weighed down by a traumatic story,
Mm-hmm.
we're telling the story from the perspective of, this is what it means, this is what generational trauma means, and these are the things that maybe you might get triggered by this and you don't even know why. It's because you're actually feeling the generations of trauma. It's not even your personal trauma, it's from the generations before. So it really it helps people to look at stories and books in a different way. And we can have a lot of fun with that, like looking at the story from a different perspective, and how do we then package it up. And that's, like I say, that's the publisher and the editor that works with you on that. Not, you don't have to try and figure that out yourself at all.
Nice, nice. Yeah, it is quite the process, to get all that done. But it's good to know, because if they're an overthinker like I am, it's like you start and you get stuck because your brain like gets carried away. So it'd be
Yes.
good to
Yeah.
have someone that can ground you. Now, how did your experiences lead you to found the House of Story Medicine?
Well, it's interesting. So my publishing company, which I founded actually in Vancouver in 2010, is called Influence Publishing. So, for the last 15 years, Influence Publishing has been writing books that influence the way we see the world. And then I went to Costa Rica about 6 months ago. And I really reevaluated the purpose of my publishing company. And what I realized was that, our stories are medicine for us. They're medicine to help us really understand what happens to us, why it happens to us, what is that journey that you're going through, how do your illnesses and things that happen to your body, how are they reflected, in your journey. And I did a lot of work with naturopathic doctors and the holistic healers, where they help people to really understand that your story is your medicine. If you can heal those pieces of your story, you can heal your body.
So, Julie, you were saying too, and I can see that, how writing the story, helps people to heal instead of packing down their emotions, which really kind of ties into the energy, the energy field, the energy work. How would you say your intuition plays in helping people write their narratives and their story?
When I was in Costa Rica, and I was really doing some deep, inner work, and I actually had my Akashic records drawn. And what they said in the Akashic records is that I am the eye of the soul, And, you know, when I heard that, I was like, oh my goodness, I've never been able to put it into words how I use my intuition, you know, because, you know, you just do it. And people would say to me, how do you do that? Like, how did you know that? And when I heard that I'm the eye of the soul, I was like, oh, that makes total sense. It literally is like I can see into the person's soul. I can see the things that they can't see. It's like, and it's not even just the hidden stories, Laura.
Mhm.
It's kind of connecting the dots, because I've listened and I've heard some other pieces of their story that they've not necessarily connected, and so then I'll say something and it just drops for them, and they're like, oh my goodness, that's what it is, you know. And it's literally is, the story drops, and suddenly everything that they went through has a reason, you know. It all has a reason now. And so, you know, it's really life changing for people when they have that, you know, when they see that, you know. Like, for example, one of the ladies I was working with, Ali, she wrote this book, The Heart of Healing Trauma. And, you know, as we were working, was really relating to, every time she talked about art and every time she talked about music, because she would say, you know, when this happened to me, I would just turn to my guitar, or when this happened to me, I would write a song, you know, or when this type of thing came across my path, I would go into my bedroom and I'd pick up my paintbrush. And she hadn't made the connection that she was using art and music as her therapy. And so when I said that to her, and I said, you know, Ali, it seems like you use art, and music as your therapy. And she was like, oh my God, that's it. Oh, Julie, that's it. That's exactly it. And I said, you know, Ali, I think they even do like certification in that. You can be certified as an art and music therapist. And she was like, oh my God, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. That's it. That's it. Oh my God. I spent my whole life trying to figure out how I can use my art and how I can use my music. And like literally, she just related to it so much. She went and she looked up art therapy, and she's now a certified art and music therapist. And she now has a full studio in Victoria, PC, where people come to see her as a therapist, and she shows them how to use art and how to use music to process their therapy. And it's like, I think that's a really good example of where you can see the eye of the soul. And I can say, okay, I've managed to put all these little pieces together. I've looked into your soul, and I can say, this is it. This is what you're supposed to be doing. And it's just like, yeah, I've had so many people, light bulbs just come on, bing, 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 you know, and they're just like, ah, that's it. You know?
Well,
It's
and it's true, and it's incredible how much we do stuff and we don't really realize, you know, we're doing. It's just kind of become like our norm, or this is just what we do.
Mhm.
But other people can see it because we kind of can't see it ourselves.
That's right. You see, you need to tell your story in an environment where people can reflect it back to you. You know, it's like holding up a mirror to somebody as they tell their story, and then their story reflects back on them, and like, oh, and then they see their own story in a different way as well. And then when you know, say these things, you know, that kind of help them join those dots together, that's when, and then other people join in. I mean, that's why I love doing retreats, right, Laura?
Yeah.
Especially like small intimate retreats with like 4 or 5 people, where, you know, it's very intimate. People feel very safe sharing in a small group, because then you build these relationships, and everybody in the group helps one another, right? Because somebody might say something in a way that I might have said it in one way, but then they say it in a slightly different way, and that sits with the person more than what I said or what the other person says. So that's why I love doing, you know, small group retreats. And it's interesting because most kind of retreats you go on for book writing and that type of thing, they're always big groups. They're like 20 people or, 30 people, and there's no personal attention there. And this is like really, well, like I say, it is therapy. We have Jennifer is our therapist. So, there's with only a small group, like 4 or 5 people, there's basically 4 people and two facilitators.
Yeah, and I would think writing a book is more of an intimate kind of personal thing that you need more personal support and not just be like part of the crowd where if you need that help, oh, you've run out of time and then you can't get the support, that you truly need. I would think that would just kind of add to the frustration of
Yes,
people.
and really, I have to be honest that not many publishers give that kind of support at all. The traditional form of publishing a book is that you submit a finished manuscript, right? And then
Right.
it goes to the editor, and the editor, does the writing part, in terms of like giving the technical writing, right? Giving it nicer sentence structure and grammar and things like that. But there's no support in the actual writing of the story. And that's really, I mean, that's the trap that a lot of people fall into, right? I can't tell you how many people have fallen into the Balboa Hay House story, right? Where they go on the Hay House cruise, or they go on the big Hay House conference, and it's like, oh, submit your story, and you could be picked up by Hay House, and it's actually everybody else is going into the self-publishing Balboa Press, and their instructions are to submit their story, and that's it, right? And there's no guidance, there's no help, and frankly, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? So
Yeah.
you can edit uh, a bunch of garbage, but maybe the sentences sound better, but it's still garbage, right? So and a book is really, you only have one opportunity to make a first impression. So, the number of times that people have said to me, oh yeah, well, I just uploaded my book onto Amazon and it was free. I'm not going to pay for an expensive publisher when I can just upload it to Amazon for free. And it's like, yes, you can upload it to Amazon for free. Yes, you can, with all your spelling mistakes, with all your writing errors, with all your garbage that you've just droned out, not even thinking about what the reader wants to hear or how you can help them. And it's really is the biggest mistake that people make, because it's all about them, right? So that all they're doing is telling their story, telling you all about their trauma, all about what they went through, how terrible it was and how painful it was. And that's it. I mean, who wants to read about somebody else's trauma?
Right.
Right? I mean, if you're reading about somebody's trauma because there's a solution and they tell you how they overcome these things, then great. But, most of the books that you see that have been uploaded for free on Amazon because they've had no support, and all they're doing is regurgitating all their trauma into a book, which isn't
Yeah.
very interesting to read.
We have a few minutes left, Julie. What advice would you give to someone hesitant to share their own story with the world?
Well, I would say, think carefully about your why. Like if you're holding back your story because you feel like, you're not good enough, or it's not interesting enough, or your writing's not good enough, all of these things. Think about, are you being selfish by keeping that story to yourself? How many people could you help by sharing your story? So it's not about you, and it's not about your story. It's about how can you help other people by sharing your story. So I think if you just repurpose it in that way, and really, stop thinking about yourself, and think about how you can help other people, then I think more people would share their stories.
Yeah, and that's kind of a common thing even with business. It's like if you're putting other people first and it's not about your bottom line, it's the same kind of concept.
Yes, yeah, it is absolutely. So, yeah, I try to inspire more people to write books, and I really encourage people to come. And that's why now my sort of business model is more about come and spend a week with me on the beach, because we can't do this with all the distractions that you have. You need to really give yourself a whole slice of time where you can just really focus on your story, and you can really focus on how you can help other people. So I just say, hey, just like come and spend a week with me in Mexico. Let's walk the beach. Let's float in the ocean. Let's sit by the pool, just like you're telling your friends your darkest secrets. And then we'll figure out how you can help other people by publishing that.
Yeah, and I've seen pictures of that villa. It's absolutely gorgeous.
It is. It's the perfect environment for writing, because and what I do realize, I've really realized this, Laura, is that, your environment is very important. If you're going to be writing, you need to feel like you don't have distractions, but also a beautiful environment. Like we kind of like stare off into the distance, right? So isn't that better to be looking out to the ocean for inspiration, looking at the night stars with, no light pollution at nighttime for inspiration, walking the beach for inspiration, floating in the water. We really embrace the four elements, and we use those four elements to really help put you in that creative environment. So yeah, just do yourself a favor and just come to Mexico for a week.
Nice. And before we go, I know you have a gift for everybody. You want to tell them about that?
I do. Yes, I would really love to give people the opportunity to have a story activation call with me. It's a 30-minute call where I can just really look into your soul, and within 30 minutes, I can give you some really good markers in terms of your direction, and maybe some of those uncovering some of those hidden stories that you're holding back right now. There's so many people right now, Laura, that are kind of saying, oh, there's just something more. I feel like there's something more. I feel like I haven't really truly stepped into all I can be. So in a 30-minute story activation call, I can give you some pointers, and help you to maybe start that journey of discovering your story as a portal to your soul purpose.
Nice. Yeah, I'm sure you could, because you can obviously see you excel at what you do. You light up when you talk about that, and I love people that are so passionate. They're doing what they're meant to do because they just light up. So I want to
Yes.
thank you, Julie, so much for joining us today and sharing that with everybody. Because I know there's a lot of people out there that maybe they haven't thought about it, or they have, but they have no idea where to start.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes, thank you so much for the time, Laura. And I really hope we have inspired some people to want to share their story to help other people.
absolutely. And I know you and I could probably have a whole nother show, because, I know you aren't military or anything, but I'm kind of curious as to the what sparked the whole 7 year the whole 7 year travel journey. That just sounds completely amazing. But
Yes. Yeah, we could talk about that another time for sure.
yeah, but thank you so much for joining us and sharing all that with us. So anyone thinking about writing a book, or if you are writing one and you're struggling, reach out to Julianne, and all of her contact information will be there. But obviously, she's very passionate about it, and I do believe she can help you. So thank you, everyone, for joining us, and have a mindful Monday and a wonderful week coming up. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks, Laura.